What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I'm going to do a penetration test with my 300 WinMag rifle, and I'm going to be shooting it at some 16 gauge sheet metal. And the purpose of the test is to see how many sheets of 16 gauge sheet metal a 300 WinMag can penetrate through. Now, I've already done part one, so if you haven't seen part one, check it out. In part one, I used a solid bullet from Choice Ammunition, and it was 180 grain cutting edge Safari solid. And in this test, I'm going to use expanding bullets. I'm going to use two different types of bullets. I'm going to use the Accubond and the Barnes LRX. The Accubond is a traditional jacketed bullet, but it has a bonded core, so the lead core is bonded to the jacket, so that makes the bullet really tough and able to penetrate really deep without blowing apart. And the Barnes LRX is a solid copper bullet that expands and has a little hollow point and petals that open up when it hits something. So I'm going to use factory ammo for this test. So for the Barnes LRX, I'm going to use some Choice Ammunition, and they load this to 3,022 feet per second out of a 24-inch test barrel. But out of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan that I'm using for this test, I get around 2,850 feet per second. And this is the 175 grain Barnes LRX. And for the Accubond, I'm going to use some Underwood ammo, and they load theirs to around 3,150, but I think they use a 26-inch test barrel. Out of my 20-inch barrel, I get around 2,850 as well. So both of these cartridges are leaving the muzzle of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan at 2,850 feet per second, and they're both generating around 3,200 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So these are not the hottest 300 WinMag loads, but they're still hotter than a 3006. So on the right here, we have the Barnes LRX, and on the left, we have the Accubond. Both of them around the same weight, and they have almost identical ballistic coefficients. So I'm really curious to see how these will perform against sheet metal. And the sheet metal I'm using in this test is just some regular 16 gauge steel sheet metal that I picked up at my local home improvement store. And what I've done is I made a wooden jig to hold these sheets up, and the jig spaces the sheets out about 1.5 inches. And so we're going to be able to see exactly how many sheets these two rounds will penetrate through. And it's 16 gauge sheet metal, so it's heavy duty sheet metal. This isn't like something that you could just easily bend with your bare hands or cut with some basic pruning shears. This is heavy duty sheet metal. It's a 1/16 of an inch thick. Okay, so it's thick stuff. It's very tough stuff. So I'm curious how many sheets of sheet metal these expanding 300 WinMag bullets will penetrate through. And if you want to see how the solid bullets did, check out part one. I'll leave a link to part one in the top right corner of this video. So I want to just show you guys my rifle that I'm going to be using for this test. So I'm using a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan, and it has a 20-inch barrel. And this stock that I have on here is a Hogue stock. It has an aluminum bedding block. This is not the factory stock that comes with it. I put this stock on the rifle. I have a Timney trigger that I installed on this thing. I have an Athlon Midas HMR 2.5 to 15 power second focal plane scope. I have a Sniper Tools bubble level and angle cosine indicator. I have an Atlas bipod on there, and I have a Silencer Co. Omega 300 suppressor and a Coltac HTP suppressor cover. And here's that Silencer Co. Omega 300. I absolutely love this suppressor. I think it's the best 30 caliber suppressor. So take a guess. How many sheets do you think these 300 WinMag expanding bullets will go through? All right, guys, 300 WinMag versus 16 gauge sheet metal. I got my Silencer Co. Omega 300 suppressor. This is a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan. It has a 20-inch barrel. First shot is going to be with the choice ammunition, 175 grain LRX. This is a solid copper expanding bullet. And the second shot is going to be with an Underwood ammo, 180 grain Accubond. And they both have a muzzle velocity of about 2,850 feet per second. And they generate around 3,200 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. All right, guys, so here were my two hits. This was the 175 grain LRX, and this was the 180 grain Accubond, both with a muzzle velocity around 2,850 feet per second. So let's see how many they penetrated through. So, wow, look at how that Accubond just blew apart the sheet metal and left a huge hole through these pieces of sheet metal. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and looks like it stopped in the 9th sheet. So it penetrated through 8 sheets of 16 gauge sheet metal, Underwood ammo, 180 grain Accubond, 300 WinMag, 8 sheets of 16 gauge sheet metal. That's pretty impressive, guys. That's a ½ inch of steel. And you can see all the fragments from that Accubond. Check that out. You see all the fragments in there? Just pieces of lead everywhere. So I don't think I'm going to find that Accubond. I think it probably blew apart. But I'm going to look for it, and we're going to take a closer look at these sheets when I get home. I'm going to show you guys what they look like up close. And then let's look at the LRX now. So here was the LRX. There's the first sheet. We got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the hole in there, right there. 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you can actually see the bullet there. There's the LRX right there. And it actually punched a hole in the 11th sheet there, but it didn't actually penetrate it. It just punched a little bit of a hole. It kind of split the metal there. You see how it split it? And then it just bounced off and fell down. And there it is. So that's pretty impressive. And look at this piece of shrapnel there embedded in the wooden block. Check that out. Wow. So it punched through with authority, and a chunk of sheet metal just ripped off and embedded itself into the wood. That's why you always want to keep a good distance away when you're doing tests like these, or when you're shooting sheet metal, or if you're shooting any kind of metal. So pretty impressive. 10 sheets of 16 gauge sheet metal with the choice ammunition, 175 grain LRX, and 8 sheets of sheet metal with the Underwood ammo, 180 grain Accubond. That's really impressive. That's actually about the same penetration as the solids I tested. And if you want to see that test, I'll leave a link in the top right corner of this video. So stay tuned. I'm going to take these sheets home. We're going to take a closer look at the bullets and the sheets of sheet metal. All right, guys, so I want to go over the results of the test with you. I want to share the sheets up close so you guys can see what exactly happened to them. And I did recover the bullets, so we're going to take a look at the bullets up close. But first, I want to show you these pieces of sheet metal. So here was our first sheet, and I hit down here with the LRX, and then up here with the Accubond. And you can see nothing really too interesting in the first sheet, just a clean 30 caliber hole. And let's just look at the back of the first sheet. What's interesting is that actually the Accubond kind of punched a cleaner hole than the LRX. You can see the LRX, the hole is a little bit more rough. And with the Accubond, you can see it kind of looks more like a laser cut through it. So I'm not sure the reason for that. You can see there's quite a bit of copper deposited inside of the hole there from the LRX. Okay, so a lot of copper deposited. Here we have the second sheet. Here's our LRX hole. Here's our Accubond hole. Look at how the Accubond is already starting to expand. Look at the size difference in these holes. Check that out, guys. That's a massive hole there. And then here's the LRX. Here we have the third sheet. Now we can really see a big difference between the LRX and the Accubond. Look at this, guys. This looks like some lead around that hole there. But look at the difference between the Accubond and the LRX. Huge difference in these holes, okay? The LRX is starting to expand a little bit now. You can see it's a little bit bigger than the first and second sheet, but I mean, I can basically almost fit my whole index finger in there. Check that out. And here's the back of the third sheet. Okay, check that out. How the Accubond tore through that metal there. That's just crazy. And then clean cut with the LRX. Here we have the fourth sheet. LRX hole is basically still the same size. Accubond hole is getting a little bit bigger now. And look at how it just busted through this hole. Check that out. The Accubond just plowed right through. And look at this piece of metal here. That's pretty sharp. It's just crazy how it could just blast right through that metal like that. It's just impressive. And then the LRX, just clean cut. Here we have the 5th sheet, and you can see the LRX hole still basically the same. The Accubond hole about the same, maybe slightly larger now. And here's the back of the 5th sheet. Okay, here's the Accubond hole. Here's the LRX hole. Here we have the 6th sheet. Now you can really see the LRX hole getting a lot bigger. Okay, check that out. And the Accubond hole, quite large. I can fit my thumb in there. Check that out. That's a big hole. And then look at how it just plowed through the metal there. Just punched right through. And then the LRX also punching right through. And here we have the 7th sheet. There's our LRX hole, Accubond hole. Accubond hole still quite massive. Look at that, guys. That is just insane. I mean, I can basically put my whole thumb in there. It's just impressive penetration for a soft point. Here's the 8th sheet. Here's our LRX. Here's our Accubond. Check that out. Here's the back of the 8th sheet. Wow, look at this. Look how that Accubond just tore through the metal there. That is just crazy. And it looks like you could just bend this back like it's aluminum foil, but this is heavy duty metal, guys. I mean, I have strong hands and I can't even budge this. It's crazy. And then there's the exit hole from the LRX. And here we have the 9th sheet. The Accubond did not penetrate through the 9th sheet, but it kind of punched a little bit of a hole in it. You can see it fractured the metal. Okay, if I put my hand behind, you'll be able to see it better. You can see it fractured the metal, but it didn't punch through. So 8 sheets for the Underwood ammo, 180 grain Accubond. And LRX still going through. And here's the back of the 9th sheet. You can see the Accubond. It just fractured the metal, but it didn't actually penetrate through. So 8 sheets for the Accubond. And then here we have the 10th sheet. And here we have our LRX hole. And here's the back of the 10th sheet. Look at how the LRX just ripped that steel off. That's just impressive, guys. Absolutely impressive. And then the LRX was stopped by the 11th sheet. It did the same thing that the Accubond did. It just kind of fractured the metal, but it didn't actually punch through, okay? See how it fractured it, but didn't punch through? So really interesting results, guys. I wasn't really expecting this much penetration from a soft point. The solids penetrated through 10 sheets. So the Accubond only penetrated through 2 sheets less than the solid, the 180 grain cutting edge solid. I definitely did not expect that from a soft point. And the LRX actually penetrated the same amount as the solid. So based on all testing I've done so far with sheet metal, it seems that solids and soft points basically have the same effect on sheet metal, at least when it's spaced apart the way that I have it in my tests. If they were clamped together, I think the solid would penetrate a lot deeper, but the jacketed bullets and the expanding bullets seem to have the same amount of penetration as solids in sheet metal when the sheet metal is spaced apart. So pretty interesting results. I want to just show you guys the bullets now. I found the bullets. All right, guys, so here are our bullets. This is the 175 grain LRX. And look at how you have pieces of sheet metal fused to it. I was going to try to weigh this bullet and see what kind of weight retention we had, but it's going to be very hard for me to separate the sheet metal from the bullet itself. I mean, I think that's really cool. Look at that. Got the bullet there, and then on the other side you have pieces of sheet metal fused to it. Look at that, guys. That's just insane how it fused together. Really, really cool. And that's what I've noticed with these sheet metal tests, is that what'll happen is that bullets will just punch through the sheet metal like a hole puncher. Like in grade school when you punched paper with a hole puncher to put in your binder, and you got those little circular pieces of paper after you punch the hole. That's basically what happens when you shoot at sheet metal. The bullet will actually punch a hole, and there'll be like a little coin of sheet metal, and as the bullet is punching through all the sheet metal, the coins will stack up against each other, and that's how you have all these pieces of sheet metal like this fused together. It's pretty cool. And then here's the Nosler Accubond, or what's left of it. So I couldn't find the jacket. I don't know where it went, but you can see a good amount of the core still survived, and you can actually see the base there. Check that out. It's pretty interesting. So actually, this isn't the core, but this is actually the jacket here. The lead core was peeled back so far that the jacket actually looks like lead, but the jacket and the core still stayed together. These Accubond bullets are just absolutely incredible. They're my favorite bullet. I think they're just the best all-around bullet. I've shot Accubonds at so many different types of materials, and they always perform really well. So I'm really impressed that the Accubond was still able to hold together after going through 8 sheets of 16 gauge sheet metal. That's a 1/2 inch of steel, okay? And the bullet is still together. Look at that. You can see the jacket just peeled all the way back to the base, okay? And then here we have those coins that I was talking about. So basically what happened was the bullet was traveling through the sheet metal, and as it was traveling through, these coins stacked up against each other. Okay, you see that? Check that out. These are just pieces of sheet metal that were fused together, and the bullet actually fits just perfectly inside of this. So basically, the bullet smashed through all of the sheets, and it punched these little metal coins, and they stacked up together. Look at that, guys. That's just crazy. Isn't that cool? Check that out. So that's pretty much it for this test, guys. If you're interested in seeing more of my sheet metal tests, check out my sheet metal penetration tests playlist. I'll leave a link in the top right corner of this video. I recommend you watch part 1 of the 300 WinMag versus sheet metal test with the solid. And I also did 416 Ruger solids and expanding bullets, and I've also done 308 full metal jacket. So check those out. I have a lot more sheet metal tests coming, so stay tuned to my channel for more sheet metal tests, including pistols and shotguns. If you're interested in seeing more 300 WinMag content, check out my 300 WinMag playlist, and I'll leave links to all of these playlists and videos in the top right corner of your screen. So that's pretty much it, guys. Take care. May God bless you. May God bless America. And don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.